Hello?
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
Oh, hello, Barney.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Bonjour.
Hi.
How you doing there? Yellow. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yo.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Well, hello, my friends. Marc Mandel here from Wow Moments. Welcome to episode number 3 of Customer Experience Tales from the Trenches. I'm so glad that you're here and we're together for the next 40 or 45 minutes. Thanks for hanging out with me. You know, this has been quite a journey so far for me. Episode 3 of this program. We started our first one in late July. We did one in August. And we did one today in September for the 3rd episode. I've learned a lot about podcasting and webinars along the way, and I'm hoping and thinking that we get better in time. And I would love to hear your thoughts about this. You know, when I think about the purpose of this show, why am I doing this show? What are we here to talk about, and why does it matter? I thought I would take just a moment and just kind of give you kind of where my thought process has been. There's a lot of content out there on the internet about customer experience management work that we all do and love. But, you know, I think a lot of this stuff turns into one of two things, either advertisements for vendors or still trying to convince us at some level or another that we should just go pay attention to our customers more and maybe they'll like us better. You know, where they tend to fall short is, how do I do this? What practical things can I do at work tomorrow morning to make a difference for my customers? And that's what this show is about. This show, I'm hoping, is so much different than the others, where this is all about the how and the how not versus just the why or the what. This particular episode is a special one. While we're here together today, we're going to take a lot of time to talk a lot about a topic that is sort of an emerging topic in our space. It's the connection between customer and employee experience. And we're going to tear that apart over 40 or 45 minutes in every which way. So hang in there. That's coming up. And we have a couple of special guests who are going to talk about that with me in just a few minutes. But more on that in a moment. When I look back on this show over the last couple of episodes that we've done together so far over the last couple of months, you know, the first episode was a big topic. We talked a lot about AI and customer experience because there's a pretty big topic out there, right? Everywhere you look, it's about AI, how it's going to change everything. So episode 1 was all about AI, and I hope you took a look at that. If you're not, go check it out. It's worth it. Episode 2 was a little bit different. We as practitioners in CX, you know, sometimes struggle with getting our work to A, be sticky in our organizations, or B, get our bosses to even notice our work anymore to the point where they fund it and continue to fund it and staff it the way we need them to. So I had a couple of guests last month where we talked a lot about how do we get our work to stick and how do we get to make sure that we continue to get funded now. In addition, you may have seen some short video clips that I do. I do about 1 or 2 a week. There's a special different topic tracks that I call Customer Experience Minute to Win It. Those are put out on LinkedIn. I put them out on YouTube, much like this program as well. And I hope you check those out as well. Well, let's talk about some things that are really interesting to me and hopefully to you. You know, I started doing a segment on this show, just a couple of minutes, literally, about something that I'm going to call my wow moment. Something that came along in the last week or 2 or 3 in my life that really struck a chord with me and excited me. And I want to talk about that with you just for a moment. It is a vendor that I became connected with and familiar with over the last maybe 30 days. And man, are they someone special. And that is a company, if you've never heard of them, called Opinator, Opinator. They're a smaller company in the voice of the customer business. And I want to encourage you to go check them out at opinator.com. They've really been unique in how they take a look at customer engagement as a part of your voice of the customer work in a way that your surveys become an intentional part of the customer journey with you. And in doing this, they really begin to overcome a lot of the challenges around people are not taking my surveys anymore. They're doing some really special work there, and check out Opinator. They're well worth it. Another wow moment that I have is about a book. And you may remember, if those of us that were together in the episode last month or the one before that, you know I do this little book club segment. I'm going to do this here as well with a brand new book that came across my radar screen recently. This is a book that's called CX Pro Beyond the Basics, Advanced Insights for Customer Experience Professionals by a good friend, Carl Charisse. This book came out last week from the publisher, and it's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I almost said B. Dalton, but that would be dating me from a long time ago. Check it out. It's available in all formats. And what this is, the compilation, guys, they put together 12 or 13 authors who had different opinions about parts of the customer experience story. And they put this together and they published it in a book, and Carl edited the whole thing. I bring it up in part because I think this book is terrific, because much like this show, it's full of practical information that you can think of and do right away. This is not a big high level, here's why customer experience matters. That's not what this is. This is how do you do it and how do you make it real. I, in fact, had a chapter in this book myself, and I talked about AI, but instead of giving you rave reviews about AI and how it's going to change the world, I took a more cautionary tale about AI, and I think that that's really important that you should know that. What I'd like to do with Carl's book, I called Carl a few days ago, and I said, Carl, I need to order a bunch of copies of your book. And so we made an arrangement where he's going to sell me a bunch of these. I'm going to give them to you guys. Not everybody is going to be able to get one. I know we're going to have a bunch of people in this show, but I'm going to try to give away 10 or 20 copies of this over the next few days. And my only criteria to get a copy is you need to ask for it. So if you have the ability to either direct message me or email me or send me a comment on the side here or through LinkedIn or any channel you want and say, I want a copy of the CX Pro book, I'll make sure that Carl and I pack up a copy and get it to you over the next few days. It's worth it, and it'll be my gift and Carl's gift to you in the hope that you are willing to take a look at it and share it maybe with others if you like it as much as I do. So it's called CX Pro Beyond the Basics. But guys, I know for a fact why we're together here today. Again, I mentioned customer and employee experience. And that's a bigger and bigger topic. More often than not, at least in the past, in my experience, the customer experience organization in a company was dramatically siloed from the employee experience or the HR organization in those companies. And very rarely did they have much cooperation between the two. They were seen as dramatically different purpose and mission groups. And only recently have I started to see trends where these things are starting to come together, where they're coalescing more and larger into one more cohesive organization. I worked with a client recently in the retail space, in fact, where the vice president of customer experience rolled up to the chief people officer in the company. And those linkages became really empowering. The reason I think they're important, I'm going to talk about this with my guests in just a minute, is you think about the customer journey. You think about how these customers and companies touch one another day in and day out. And more often than not, there's some kind of human to human interaction going on. And it's that human to human interaction where we get into trouble, right? Because, and we'll talk more about the data behind this, statistics are telling us that people, generally speaking, don't love their work these days. They're going through the motions, they're working for the paycheck, whatever you want to call it as, but they're not highly engaged at work. And at the same time, we as customer experience or customer-minded people, we're forced to rely on these people day in and day out to authentically engage and authentically delight our customers. So on one hand, these guys don't much love their jobs. They're kind of sleepwalking through them. Think about even call centers. Oh my God. In call centers, people, they don't stay employed, right? They come in, they take the job, they get trained, they leave. I have friends that run contact centers. They said they have 80, 90% turnover in any given year. It's off the charts. How do we get people to stay in their work, try harder to serve one another, and to do the right thing? Instinctively, we want to do the right thing, but maybe there are blockers in our way. So I'd like to introduce two of my good friends. The first gentleman I'm going to introduce, his name is Matt Egol. Matt is going to introduce himself in just a moment, but he's an expert he's a consultant. He's been a professional in this space for his career. And I asked him to join and share with us some stories about some of the work that he does. And then I have our good friend, Audrey from JP Morgan Chase, who's come in and tell us things from the client side point of view, where she works in the employee experience part of the organization, but is a very customer-minded person. So Matt and Audrey, let me bring you guys into this conversation and introduce you both.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, guys. It dawns on me before we got this conversation started that while I feel like you guys are old friends, some folks in this show may not know you. So can I take just a moment and ask you guys each to give a little story about yourself, the work that you're doing, kind of things that you're seeing, and then we'll kind of turn that into a good conversation. And Audrey, could I pick on you to start?
Sure, no problem. Hey guys, my name is Audrey Stone, and I have probably been a customer enthusiast my entire life, starting off in customer service. I believe everybody should have some front lines experience to appreciate what we do today. I started JP Morgan Chase about 5 years ago, and I applied my technology skills to our cybersecurity space. And so working with our internal folks to help other employees, enable them to do their jobs across the firm.
Fascinating. I want to talk more about that as we get into the conversation. Matt, can we learn a little bit more about you and your work as well?
Sure. Happy to share a little bit, Mark. So I'm a recovering consultant from a big firm and now enjoying being more of an entrepreneur and a coach. I grew up in Booz and Company and PwC, where I focused on digital transformation initially in the retail consumer space, where I led that digital transformation practice, and then later expanded across industries to take the work in digital transformation, which is really about experiences like e-commerce and loyalty and personalization, and applied that across industries. And along the way, I figured out I was an experience guy, not just digital guy, and really brought in to focus on how to drive change and culture evolution in companies to deliver on a more customer-driven approach, which really requires bringing CX and EX together, which we're going to talk about today. And then recently, in the last couple of years, I founded JourneySpark Consulting to be able to work more closely with clients to help them on their own journeys to be more customer-driven and act more as a guide and a coach on their journey versus large consulting programs.
Fascinating. So guys, I thought I would tee up this conversation with just a deeper investigation of what I've already alluded to. I go back in my mind to the data that I want to say that I've heard mostly attributed to the Gallup organization, where Gallup talks about employee engagement or employee disengagement. And I think the numbers that they came out with recently in the last 90 days or 120 days are that it's upwards of 75% of, they said, the American workforce is somewhere between disengaged at work and what they called actively disengaged, which to me means either I'm at work, but I don't really like it much, or I'm at work and I don't really like it much, and I'm actively looking for a new job. And on the other hand, companies want these very same people to authentically serve customers in a way, whether they be internal customers, external customers, but the idea is they want a level of real authenticity, bringing their A game to work every day, but in a situation where they don't want to, or, generally speaking, or they don't feel incentivized to, or whatever the thing is. I want to talk more about that with both of you guys, but we rely on them, and I don't know that we can. And I think that there's a clear need to turn this around before it's too late. And I'm curious what you guys have seen. If you guys seen similar results in either Matt in your consulting work or Audrey at your work at the company, where there's this loss of connection between the employee and the mission and the company and the values and its ability to really drive and motivate somebody. What are your thoughts about that?
We're human beings. At the end of the day, our emotions matter. What matters is what has meaning for us. And that's what creates more memorable experiences. If there's a stronger emotion with more meaning, it's more memorable. That's where the peak end in a journey is. The peaks are when there's a stronger emotional connection, which is more memorable. That's true both customer and employee experience. And reason I start with emotion is we can look at both sides of this. If your employees have a better experience, they're more emotionally connected to each other and to the business, and they will show up in the right way. They'll have the right behaviors. They'll be more committed. We can talk about how you foster the right behaviors that lead to the right emotions for your customers. So your employees deliver to the customers, but they're also then more proud of the work that they're doing, and they're more engaged in your company. So it actually pays dividends on both sides, with both the employee side and the customer side. When you drive higher employee engagement, the business case is through lower turnover, higher productivity, lower recruiting costs, et cetera. And on the customer side, when your employee, most customer experiences, unless you're Netflix, I like to say, involve an employee engaging with the customer. And your employees behave in a certain way. And if they do that consistently in the ways that you are intentional about, it delivers the right emotional connection to the customer. Mm-hmm. And I find with clients an 80% fit with the right behaviors and emotions and the right outcomes. And you can see this, in retail, financial services, healthcare. When you measure it at the location level, the higher EX and higher CX go together, and you get higher store profitability, branch profitability, et cetera.
Interesting. Audrey, what have you seen?
So I work at just a little company called JPMorgan Chase. Don't know if you ever heard of it. This is from my perspective, not from a corporate perspective, of course. I look at employee experience, the input, and the engagement is the output. So they're reciprocal of each other. You've always heard you can't pour from an empty cup. Put your oxygen mask on before somebody else. So with as many people as can be employed, from a small company to one the size of JPMC, I always look at what are we doing to enable them, the employees, all of us, right? It's not us versus them. I should say all of us, to feel connected as if we were a small company, and to provide the best technology, processes, people where they should be to enable their success. And then by doing that, in reciprocity, you get their engagement in programs and after hours and so on and so forth, as well as during the day. So filling their cup so they can then fill the customer's cup. Again, it's the employee satisfaction that leads to the higher customer satisfaction.
Matt, you've talked a bit already now about emotion and the linkages back to emotion. How do you see culture playing a role in this? Talk to me for a minute about organizational culture, organizational dynamic, things like that.
Culture is essential. I was lucky early in my career to get exposed to John Katzenbach and others in the Katzenbach Center at Booz and PwC, and ended up becoming a partner advocate for the Katzenbach Center, focused on the intersection of customer experience and culture. It had a big impact on me and engaging with the people in that community and the ideas there and applying them. And one thing I learned from that is that you can drive engagement and behavior of your people one of two ways: rational compliance or emotional commitment. Rational compliance is more formal. So you can think about the performance metrics, the performance management systems, everyone's being measured, everyone's being judged, et cetera. And reporting relationships and decision rights are other formal mechanisms, but that's very rational. And that the problem is that a lot of times the organization is incongruent with what you say you want it to be. And you can't just expect people to do things in the face of something that's different than what you're telling them. They see what's actually happening versus what you say. And ideally, at a really strong company, that doesn't happen too often, but there's always improvement opportunities to get it more consistent across the company, across your employee base. You can have a bell curve. Are they engaging in all the behaviors all the time, some of the behaviors, some of the time, which is the middle, or it's none of the behaviors, none of the time, the other side of the bell curve. You want to shift the bell curve. And emotional commitment is much more powerful than rational compliance. 95% of decisions we make as human beings are actually unconscious, and that they're emotionally driven. And this is not a defect where like we use emotions because we don't have reason. It's actually a feature, not a bug. And how does this work? Think about habits. There's a stimulus or cue, there's a craving, there's a behavior, there's a reward. The craving occurs before the reward because we want to activate behavior. So the mind is actually driving behavior in order to get a reward. And you do this unconsciously and you learn to do it. Now, the same thing is true with organizational behavior as with consumer behavior, is that most decision-making is still unconscious. And what you want to do is go from being unconsciously incompetent to consciously competent to unconsciously competent, which is habits, which is behavior. So if you pay attention to the behaviors you want, it's actually key to getting the emotions you want and getting the outcomes you want.
Audrey, I'm curious from your standpoint, what have you seen? Obviously, you're in this new emerging trend where you're a customer-minded person in an employee-facing organization. Tell me about culture there, and what have you seen in terms of really unlocking this in people, making them want to commit to not just bettering the culture, but bettering the entire experience for people? How do you get people to really sign up for this and really want to really invest?
So I don't think you can be 100% prescriptive on this.
Interesting.
People are going to work and do business and purchase from places and companies that they can relate to, typically, right? I want to work where I can already see myself. And so when you have, especially a global organization, you can't be so prescriptive as to say, this is what our culture is. You have to have that broad stroke of everybody is welcome here. Bring your full self to work. You are unique, and that's why we have you. Yes, you can do this job. You're amazing at it, but it's really you as a whole person and what you bring to this company. Knowing that you can do that, it's not like old school days. It was leave your trash at the door, come in with your customer service voice, right? You're bringing your full self to work. So if you need to go get a cup of coffee to wake up to sound great, or if you need, to take 5 minutes to go scream into a pillow because your last call just totally threw you off, you should have the freedom, in my opinion, to do so, right? To reset. But I also think one of the things that's sometimes overlooked, especially at a large company, is one person can make a difference.
Wow.
One person. So if somebody's like, you know what, I think this type of space is missing. I'm gonna kind of start a little group and see how that goes, and then start to expand it. And I speak on that from experience, from research as an Asian and Pacific Islander researcher. They wanted to start their own group. They're like, this is a gap. We don't have this gap in regard to our culture, and we want to make sure we connect people. Mm-hmm. And so doing research on that, we found out that others wanted that connection as well. And we asked, what do you just want to have an open forum? What do you want to do exactly? With what would cause you to come to these meetings if we have them? And that really boosted the culture in regard to, hey, it's so we're not saying nobody can come in. We're saying everybody come in, learn, we'll have like cooking shows and talk about, past stories and things. So I highly believe that if you see there's a gap and you take the initiative, the company that you're working for should, again, that's the culture, right? Are they going to shut you down, or are they going to lift you up and accept it?
Interesting.
What you're highlighting, Audrey, is the importance of energy in a company, the energy can be lifted up or can be brought down.
100%.
And the energy is a renewable resource of of your people,
Mhm.
right? And the energy of your people, you want some top-down initiatives in order to drive the right behavior, whether they're cornerstone disciplines like quality management or agility or human-centered design. These are things that link CX and EX. But some of them may happen organically with your people, and you want to nurture and not shut off that energy.
Right. Absolutely.
So I noticed a question, that Carl has asked in the questions in the side, which has been on my mind as well. And you guys have been kind of getting right up to this, but I don't know that I've got quite an answer. We know the importance now of culture. We know the importance of unlocking people's best selves at work. We know all this now. But my question here, I want to really drill into for a minute, is what's the chicken and what's the egg? So from that perspective, do we think in what might be old school thinking where we define our ideal culture and then hire for the culture? Or do we let the culture become what the culture is by engaging the right people to come in regardless of their beliefs, and let the culture become a sum total of the people? And so do we, where is the predefinition? Is it culture first and then people have to adhere? Or is it people first and culture evolves?
Personally, I think it depends. I'm
Tell me
going to
more.
give you my insurance answer, right? It depends. If it's a brand new company, you can look at a company that, like Chick-fil-A, they have their culture established and they hire accordingly. You don't have to believe in what they do, but this is how they work. And if you can adhere to the way that they work, awesome, you're welcome. Other more established places that have been around for, years and years, sometimes that culture is already set. There is a little bit of wiggle room, of course, as Gen Z comes in to play with everything. But that's my perspective. Is it already set and it's been established for a while, or are you starting a new company and this is your culture? You're going to hire to it.
I think that's right. I think that with a newer company, where you've already identified the product market fit and you're into hyper growth, it's around how do you sustain and strengthen and expand the culture as you grow without losing your way as you get bigger. And that's actually really important as companies look at how to hyperscale, and as they grow, that they don't grow in a way that erodes their strength of their culture. Now, if it's a bigger company, often what happens is your strength becomes your weakness, is that bad behaviors start occurring that are actually corollaries to previous good behaviors. There's actually a reason certain bad behaviors come into the organization without getting rejected. And then they expand and strengthen over time, or weaken over time, in the sense of the bad behaviors become more present. And what you need to do in a larger company is find your cultural champions, your heroes day to day, who are going to be the ones to showcase and engage others to spread the energy. And you also have to be very intentional about what are the behaviors you want more of. And actually, I recommend focusing more on the behaviors you want more of rather than stopping behavior. It's not a game of whack-a-mole to end bad behavior. What you do is, just like the bad behaviors crowd out the good behaviors, you want more good behaviors to crowd out the bad behaviors. And positive energy becomes infectious, where people spread it with each other. But you have to take the time to define what the behaviors are that you want. And then it's really about habit building. It's not about skill training specifically. It's around how do you activate the behaviors and find the right relevant ways to get people to be clue conscious, to borrow Lou Carbone's phrase, like what are the things you see that you want, get people to behave in the right way, and then reinforce them. And you can actually link your customer listening efforts. This is a really innovative new thing now. You can actually evolve your customer and employee listening efforts to see whether or not you're getting the emotions you want in the experience, and then what are people doing to deliver the experience that makes you feel that way. And then you can basically pinpoint your training efforts to say, okay, this is what you need practice on. These are the behaviors not doing enough, and get people to commit to a habit building cycle with the right mentorship. Right now, a lot of the time, people are not, where they fall short is they focus on values and not behaviors. And then when they actually do articulate the behaviors, they're communicating about the behaviors as an internal messaging campaign and not doing enough to drive habit building.
We'd love to turn this around for a minute. Talking about reinforcement of the positives versus whack-a-moling the negatives. I'm curious. I'm going to ask you, Matt. Was there an example that comes to mind without necessarily naming names and kind of being indicting of certain companies and people? Is there an example where an organization was struggling and then they were able to find these champions and kind of empower them to become drivers of new culture in an organization that got better outcomes? And what kind of outcomes did they get?
Sure. One health insurance company that I worked with had a customer experience program that was stalled. And they knew they needed to be more customer driven, but they knew they needed the people to be a part of it. So the head of marketing, the CMO, and the head of HR teamed on this as a culture initiative rather than a CX listening or a customer experience investment in the website or the call center. Those were important, but actually they recognized behavior was at the heart of this. Now, the punchline is they went from number 13 to number 3 in CX scores in 3 years, right? Thinking of like NPS and other metrics like that in terms of Blue Cross Blue Shield rankings, benchmarking. And what did they have to do? They need to create an I've got it culture. Now, previously, they were identifying pain points, and there were hundreds of pain points of like that they were getting back from their customer listening and all the internal research they were doing about what the employees could do wrong that delivered that bad experience. Sure. Right? As well as some of the pain points were breakdowns of like, people don't know their password or, but there were actually a lot of it is that when the experience happened, the employees showed up in the wrong way. They pivoted from chasing problems with the survey with like one problem at a time. And there's always more and more problems to whack-a-mole with. At one point, we started with like 287 pain points. How do we prioritize them?
Yeah.
Then we started focusing on what are the behaviors we want and how do we activate those behaviors and make a much more focused set of behaviors and then evolve the customer listening to be aligned to that.
Audrey, anything you could add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what I like to see is, to your point, Matt, people were sending out surveys. I would just like to see people talk to each other more. I honestly, like, surveys are one thing, but they're such a minuscule part of what an experienced professional does. If you can have from the top down, if you can have your leadership create that psychological safety culture and get out there and talk to people, you're going to find out way more than from a survey or from the lack of responses to a survey.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
From my standpoint, I'll share just a quick anecdote. If I look back on the last, I don't know, however many years of work that I've done, probably the single most often asked question that I'm asked by clients and even prospects that are not yet clients is, what one thing could I do this week at work that doesn't cost me anything to implement to drive some initial low-hanging fruit? So everybody's looking for, the magic silver bullet, but there may actually be somewhat of one. And I share with them a story around the importance of storytelling, kind of tribal knowledge storytelling in an organization, whether amongst teams of people, whether larger organizations, whether it be in town halls from the leadership down, just open dialogue of communication about what worked and didn't work. And in the hope that if it worked, we get some positive reinforcement for it to happen again. And if it didn't work, we learn that it didn't work and we get people to back away from trying it again, at least the same way. And storytelling doesn't take technology. It doesn't necessarily take money. It doesn't take significant change management. It just takes the desire for people to sit down and say, here's how my day went at work today. And here's what I learned. And here's how this customer handled the issue or a coworker handled an issue. And what went really well, awesome. And what didn't go well, let's learn from it. So for me, storytelling is casual. Storytelling is not necessarily a big formal skill set as much as it is just an open flow of communication within an organization about the good and the bad. But we could all learn from that and potentially calibrate from it and be able to do something with it.
Every leader can impact both customer and employee experience, and they come together, right? We talked about how every good CX has a corollary in the way the employees show up for that experience. Mm-hmm. The leadership experience, and the way leaders are mindful, the way they engage others and tell stories, like you just said, Mark, the way they think about the behavior and how it impacts other people and what other people are going to do next, mindfulness. So just getting your leaders to have a shared sense of the journey and a shared vocabulary and how they can collaborate, and then how they can be mindful themselves to show up better as a leader, to model the right behaviors and then train and coach others to engage in the right behaviors on their team. That starts with understanding where you want to go. So like, mm-hmm. if you want to look at the EX intersection, one of the first things you could do is look at the customer journey through the lens of how do CX and EX go together. A lot of times with EX, people focus on hire to retire as the journey. And that's an HR lens. That's actually useful if you want to apply the repertoire of human-centered design and change management culture purely through the lens of employee experience. But that's not a CX-EX overlap. That's an EX-only lens. The first step of bringing the two together is to think of your customer journey not just as what are the emotional peaks for your customers, but how are your employees involved? And what are the behaviors of your employees that deliver those emotional peaks for the customer? And to Audrey's point, you can actually get started just by getting the right people in the room, sharing experiences, having conversations. Then you might choose to go do some in-depth interviews or I often find, like Yogi Berra said, you observe a lot by watching, right? Mm-hmm. It's better to ask questions and observe people than it is to do a survey. Start with the qualitative and the in-depth. That actually you can really uncover. Go talk to your high performers and observe them, what behaviors they engage in. Get them engaged in shaping what your work is finding, and then expand it. You can bring the qualitative. You can also start leveraging AI and other tools to mine lots of unstructured data. But if you want to start smaller, start with the qual. Don't start with the quant, right? And then add the quant as early as you can, but make sure the qual's there at the beginning. Don't start with the quant.
Sure. Good advice. Audrey, anything to add?
Yeah, so I like to think of what can I do tomorrow?
Sure.
For the next, or what can I do next week?
The big question.
Yeah, and I think if as a researcher at heart, right? If I go to my product manager and I say, what do you have planned? What features or what new product or launch or what are you hoping to accomplish and put out there? Especially for the employees, right? And here's why I ask that. Because I want to know they're going down this road. If I find out who their actual customers are, and I'm able to enable those customers to then help their external customers, then I've solved a problem, right? I've increased efficiency for the company, of course, the bottom line. But for the employee, I've made it easier to do their job. So they can, that's why ESAT rises first and then CSAT, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're enabling them. And so if you're putting something out there and you don't even know who the user is or how they're using it, why they're using it, you'll have a lot of tech debt. You'll have to go back and let me fix that. You don't want an oops moment. That's definitely, that's something you can do. Have a meeting on Monday talk to somebody, and by Friday you can say, well, I know you were going down this path. I did a little bit of research, and here are my recommendations. And I betcha that's a way to get noticed.
That's great advice. You know, guys, I could sit here all day and talk about this with you guys, but I want to be respectful of your time and the time of our guests on this show. So I'm going to ask you only one more question, and it's kind of the high-level softball question, hopefully, which is really, you know, Audrey, you may have already done this here in the comment you just made. Is there any kind of advice if you were brought in as the consultant to the companies that the folks who are listening in work for, and said, hey, you know, I have a piece of advice I could give you. It's generic, it's high level, it may not necessarily fit perfectly, but it might be something to begin the conversation with. What advice would you give somebody, you know, about this type of thing? Is it about alignment? Is it about culture? Is it about empowerment? We've talked about so many different things. We talked about emotion here. What one area would you give somebody advice around to say that's going to give you a near-term potential impact that's truly measurable financially? Because I know ultimately if it's not financial, it's not going to matter.
100%. I'm a big believer in business cases. And I think even before you go to a stakeholder with a business case, you're going to have a couple small wins. And so having that external documentation to support your business case, what you've currently been able to do, and that you're not trying to boil the ocean.
Sure.
Right? You have to get your stakeholder buy-in. You have to know what's important to them so that you can say, oh, I increased usability and valueness of this and that over there. They're like, okay. Versus, hey, I saved you 196 man hours on this in one quarter. That's different, right? Even though you're talking about the same thing, it's what the leadership wants to hear in regard to the bottom line.
That's tremendous. Matt, anything that comes to your mind, whether it be along the lines of what Audrey's talking about or even something different?
I think what will make it ultimately the simplest for people is if they remember that if you want business outcomes, the formula is behavior leads to emotion, leads to outcome. If you're measuring the outcomes and trying to correlate it with your NPS or your ESAT, it's too high level. You need to understand, given my business and what I'm trying to do and the experience I'm trying to create, what are the 3 to 6 emotions I want people to feel at peaks in the journey? And if you understand those emotions, you're truly walking in the shoes of your customers and your employees. What are the emotions you want them to feel? Not what you want them to say about you. How do you want them to feel themselves? Okay. Then you can say, work your way backwards. What behaviors should I be engaging in or my team engaging in to deliver those emotions? And you can then link that to outcomes. But it starts with the emotions and then gets to the behaviors. And the behaviors is where the magic happens. But if you don't link it to emotions, you won't get the results. Interesting. Well, guys, this has been a terrific conversation, and I hope it's just the first of many that we have together in this type of thing. As we wrap up this part of the show, I know a couple of people have pinged me privately here asking how do they reach you guys? Can I ask you to give some high-level contact information, whether it be through LinkedIn or an email address that you might want to share with somebody, or some way for somebody to track you guys down?
I am always happy to connect on LinkedIn.
Good.
Absolutely. So anybody can go ahead and send me a request, and I'm a networking person. I love meeting new people and finding out what we have in common. So 100%, just search my name on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Audrey.
Similar. If you look up Matthew Egol, I spell my name out on LinkedIn, Matthew Egol, with 2 T's on LinkedIn. You'll find me, and I think I'm the only one with that name you'll find on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you. The fun way to remember my name, my daughter taught me this, is that when you fly, they use the last 3 letters of your name. So I'm Mr. Ego. and they leave the L off. And so I'm not an arrogant person, but my alter ego, whenever I traveled as many years as a consultant, was Mr. Ego, would be with the red hair flaming if I didn't get upgraded. So EGOL, not EAGLE, Matthew Egol. Happy to connect on LinkedIn, where my email is just Matt, in this case, Matt rather than Matthew, Matt@JourneySparkConsulting.com.
Awesome. Guys, again, from my heart, thank you for hanging out with my friends and I here today. We're going to have a couple more segments of this show coming up before the show winds down. But Matt and Audrey, thank you both for hanging out with us today. And
Thank you.
Have great experiences ahead, my friends.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Take care, guys. So, folks, a couple more quick segments here, a couple more housekeeping things to touch upon before we wrap up the show. One of the things I like talking about is industry news. And we're doing this as a live show here mid-September 2024. It's the 19th of the month today. By the time we come around to doing next month's show, we'll be into October. And this year on October 1st is something that we're calling CX Day. CX Day is a global recognition of customer experience. It was started by a group called the CXPA, if you know them, the Customer Experience Professionals Association. And it's a day of celebration of all things customer. I want to encourage you, if you don't know the CXPA and CX Day in specific, check it out on the web. I would encourage you, for those of you, in companies, that you might want to start a company get together for that day, or do something fun for your customers to recognize that particular day. October 1st, CX Day globally. Check it out at the CXPA's website, which is cxpa.org. You'll find much information about that. Now, as we're winding this down, my last thing I want to cover with you guys is what's coming next month. We're going to get together next month with a couple more of my friends, and we're going to talk about a pretty big topic together. I've invited, if you guys may know these guys, if you know Richard Owen at all. Richard Owen used to be the CEO of a company called Satmetrics, and he's now the CEO of a company called OCX Cognition. Check them out if you don't know them. Richard and his team have really built a better way to learn about your customers using AI and predictive and prescriptive algorithms to know exactly what's going on with your customers. We're going to tear that apart every which way, especially next month in an area where it's harder and harder to get people to take a survey. So if they're not taking your survey anymore, how do you learn more about your customers? Richard and I are going to be joined by a good friend of ours named Troy McHenry. Troy works at Blue Cross and Blue Shield here in North Carolina. He runs their customer listening program, and he's pretty awesome. So it's going to be Troy, Richard, and I, and we're going to get together in mid-October, the date to be determined, but I'll get that out on LinkedIn soon. So with that, guys, I want to say thank you. You've given us 40 or 45 minutes of your day today, and I want to thank you for that time and to share with you and have you here with us. For those that asked for a copy of Carl's book, I'm going to make sure you get a copy of Carl's book. So that's going to be on its way to you soon, and we'll see you again soon. Until then, guys, thank you for everything that you've given me and all of this support, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, my friends. Be well.